What is up, my Pro Design Builder family? I'm Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder. I'm the best in the business, and it's not even close. So I felt like I haven't done one of these in a while, which it's kind of been a little bit of time, but I've been doing a good job of continuing to educate you guys, dropping nuggets where I can when I can't go live. I've had some health issues that I'm still recovering from, but I wanted to come on today and kind of add value to you guys, add value to this group, right? So one of the things that this training is about is what is zoning laws. So, but before we get into that, this group is specifically for real estate investors who are looking to make the transition into real estate development. And for you to make that transition, you really have to understand the name of the game, right? So that's why zoning is going to be important. So, who am I? What do I do? How am I qualified to be able to educate when it comes to this subject topic, right? So, I'll just give you a little bit about my backstory. So, I've been a real estate investor. I was a real estate investor for 5 years, and I got into design build for the last 8 years. If you don't know what design build is I manage the project from concept to completion with a client, right? So the time they meet me and they have these inspirations, they have these thoughts on where they want to go, they sit down with me, I put it down on paper, and then we start to build on top of it, try to understand the whys attached to why they want to live the way they want to live. And then from there, we get our architect involved to start putting together lines, drawings, and plans. We get our designer involved to do the selection so we could narrow down on the price. And that's been my job for the last 8 years. So when it comes to anything house related, I know a house like the back of my hand, right? So that's just kind of my story. So how I initially got into real estate was unforeseen. I didn't plan on it. So my wife originally got into med school. She was supposed to go to med school in the islands, and she pretty much was like, "Surprise! I don't want to go." And I'm not gonna lie, I was crushed. I'm a power couple type of guy. I work hard. I generally I'm super ambitious. I've always been that way. And when she told me she didn't want to go, I was like, well, we got to figure something out. At the time, I owned a body shop and a car dealership, and I was going to be paying for med school. So she said, why don't we look into real estate? And that's when she handed me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I went through Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I devoured it, and it spoke to me. We went to the seminar. That spoke to me. And then from there, I needed one more seminar to kind of give me the confidence to start pressing the buttons, the things that I was learning. And that's what I did. So I had a friend at the title company. I was super green. And the difference is taking messy action, right? And I tell you the story specifically for a reason. I was so green, I didn't know what escrow was. I didn't know really the contract language, but I knew I had my buddy Mike that was going to do the title work, and he would guide me on exactly what I need to do when I got a property under contract. So I'd get a property under contract. I'll call Mike up. I was like, Mike, what do I do? Where do I put for a deposit or da 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 da? And he would just help guide me and gave me that confidence. And then I got my first deal on the contract. So that was my start into real estate, initially as a wholesaler. And then I quickly decided that I wanted to be a rehabber. So on my first deal, I hired a contractor, I fired a contractor. I hired a second contractor, I fired a second contractor. I hired a third contractor, and on my third contractor, I got through the project. Thank God the numbers were right. It made sense. We made some money. My investor made money on the deal, but I quickly realized that this business had contractor problems, right? And I was never going to be happy with the level of execution, with the timing, with the planning of what I was seeing from the contracting community. And after getting burned like that, then I started just managing my own projects. I was like, I could figure this out. So for the last 5 years, I started managing my own projects, getting in and out of rehabs very quickly. We'd be getting in and out of rehabs 45, 50 days, whole house renovation, back on the market, triggering I forget the name of the clause that it triggers when you flip it to appraisal clause, when you flip it within 90 days. But that was kind of like my experience, and that's where I gained some of my experience when it came to construction. And then I remember meeting my buddy Josh, and Josh was a big time developer in Manhattan. He had 600 million under contract with projects. He had another 400 million in the pipeline, and I sat down and I talked to Josh, and I considered even working for him to get the experience to become a developer. And I just remember leaving that meeting, and it was going to be a big move to move to Manhattan from Florida, but I was willing to do it to gain the experience, right? But I just remember leaving the meeting, and I said to him, I think I'm going to have to gain my development experience through construction, right? I think it just gave me a very different lens, a very technical lens on how to look at the construction from the ground up and educate me. It educated me in a very different way than other people may be educated that are developers, right? So because I'm accustomed to handling every aspect of the planning process, I bring that to the table and understanding why timing is important and why material selections up front is important to control costs, right? So that's the nature of my experience and the nature of how I became the pro design builder, and I continue to add to my bag. I'm an avid reader. I'm constantly reading, new material. So today, although we're going to talk about zoning, I wanted to talk about a little bit about what the current economics are, the current economic conditions are in the marketplace, right? So only true investors really look at it the way that I look at it. So I'm going to just share my lens on what's going on in the current economy, right? So I was talking to an investor friend that he's going to be funding, some projects for me in the future. But one of the things I told him, I was like, hey, listen, when there's blood in the street, are you going to be prepared to invest? And he goes, yeah, I'm excited. I want to look into it because da 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 da. So I just called him and I said, hey, listen, blood's not fully in the street yet, but when the blood hits the street, then it's going to be time to invest, right? So I know when times like this hit, it spikes fear, but it spikes fear in everyone, right? It spikes fear if you're a homeowner. It spikes fear if you're a developer. It spikes fear in general of the general conditions of the economy. It does. That's what it does, right? But Warren Buffett said, be fearful when everybody is not, and be scared. Essentially what it says is when everybody's fearful, get in the water, right? Get in the water, all right? That's where you're going to make your mark, and that's the signs of a true investor. So I wanted to talk about some of the market conditions and what is going on and how you should be looking at it moving forward, right? So for me, I just said to you, I'm looking for blood in the street, right? So when there's blood in the street, that means there's opportunity that's going to happen, right? And there's several different ways that I'm going to position myself to take advantage of these opportunities, right? So would I say today is the best time to absolutely invest? No, I will not say that, right? Because there needs to be more blood in the street. But I also want to educate you also on timing, right? So developers that are coming to market right now or had just come on the market, they're experiencing some turbulence right now. And there's no question about it. There's no hiding the turbulence that is part of coming to market right now, right? But what developers do is they have a 2 to 3 year outlook into the future, and you're always anticipating and you're always paying attention to what are the future conditions going to be like to make my investment work today, right? So pricing is going to be very important. So when there's blood in the street and you get an opportunity to get a parcel which you have no business getting, and you can get it cheap, either just knock the house down, leave the vacant lot, allow construction prices to come down because there's going to be more of a collapse in the economy, then you start preparing your documentation to get your financing, and then in 2 years or 3 years, once your construction is complete, we're in a completely different economy. So that's how I'm looking at it. So I'm not rushing to jump into something right now. I'm looking for opportunity, absolutely. And when I find that right opportunity, pull the trigger on it with the understanding that the outlook is 2 to 3 years into the future. But so I just wanted to make sure that I share that, because you may not know exactly where you should be or how you should be looking at the current economic conditions, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it, right? So we also have these tariff issues, which significantly affects construction costs, right? So because I am a builder, I see the cost increase first, right? Whether it's a sheet of drywall, whether it's lumber, and for us, we use a lot of concrete. You see those price increases first. So then that will increase the price on you as the developer until that market tames itself down, which it's unsustainable for it to stay like this forever, right? Then it becomes more predictable, right? And then when the market becomes more predictable, prices become more predictable. They have to come down because the consumers are not spending any money, and that's the position you want to be in as a developer. So that's kind of how my personal outlook is moving forward. I am looking for opportunities. I am looking to get things 40 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar if it's possible. Looking to maybe if I could get a short sale opportunity in a prime location and I could get it at 50 cents on the dollar, knock the house down, be patient, have a lower tax bill because I don't have a structure on it, and just pay, the taxes on the land costs. That's the position that I want to be in. And then when the time is right to build that ideal property, then I pull the trigger. So that's kind of the position that I'm in right now and how I'm looking at things moving forward. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's training. So what is zoning laws, right? So let me just give you the baseline of what zoning laws is and what zoning laws isn't. All right, so zoning laws are local government regulations that dictate how land within specific areas or zones can be used. These regulations help cities and towns organize land use in a way that promotes health, safety, and general welfare of the community, right? So one of the things that come to mind right away is zones is for uniformity, right? Because you don't want residential next to commercial or residential next to industrial, right? It creates uniformity that they keep industrial next to industrial, residential next to residential, multifamily near more multifamily sort of projects, or mixed use projects in certain areas. And all of that is very important and how the cities decide to do their zoning maps, right? And once you understand the idea what the city is looking to accomplish, then you're going to quickly start to be able to identify how do you find the highest and best use of that particular parcel, right? And that's the name of the game when it comes to development, right? Maximizing the highest and best use, or getting something rezoned to maximize the highest and best use of that particular parcel, right? So let's take a deeper dive. So what is the purpose of the zoning laws? We're going to kind of break this down on what this is. all right, to separate incompatible land uses, right, keeping industrial facilities away from residential, which I just already shared, to control population densities and urban growth, to protect environmental resources and historical sites, to provide guidelines for building heights, lot sizes, and setbacks for streets. So, like I said, uniformity. To regulate land use in terms of commercial, residential, agricultural, and industrial activity. All right, each serves a different purpose, and they want to have those segmented. Right. So we're gonna talk about the zoning types that I just mentioned there. All right, so you know what to expect once you identify what the terms are attached to certain zoning criteria, right? So R, which is residential, right? So we focus on 1 to 4 units. That's considered still residential, all right. So residential is R, all right? Designed for homes, apartments, housing developments. Zoning codes might specify single family as R1 or multifamily as R2, 3, and 4. All right. So sometimes if you need to get the zoning changed to maximize the highest and best use of that particular parcel, then you might hire a land use attorney, all right? And then they're going to represent on your behalf why this certain land use and use specific examples of when the land use has changed to give you that designation that will improve the value of that particular parcel, right? So then there's commercial. Commercial is designed for businesses, whether it's offices, retail, restaurants. All right, that's commercial use, right? So I'm just giving you an introduction into these. Obviously, we focus on residential, 1 to 4 units, but it's good to know. Always be prepared to add more to your bag, right? So then there's industrial, which is manufacturing, factories, warehouses, industrial facilities. That's considered industrial. Mixed use allows a combination of residential and commercial, sometimes industrial use in the same place, right? So typically what you see, especially depending on what part of the country that you are, the mixed use that you'll see is at the bottom, you'll see retail. Typically it's more of a high density city, population center, right? You'll see retail at the bottom, and then at the top you'll see residential. Right. So if you ever want to get into, mixed use, if you could find a creative way to maximize that retail that your current people that dwell in your mixed use will naturally draw into, then that will be a big win for you, right? So if you're thinking like that into the future, it puts you in a great position if you have a brand that serves your current tenants in that way, right? So then there's agricultural, right? Designed for farming, ranching, related activities. So plants, sugarcane, coffee, those are all considered agricultural. And then there's also special use, right? Which is recreational zones, historical districts, environmental protection areas with unique restrictions, right? So most of these things you're not going to encounter right now, but I just wanted to make an introduction so you understand fully how the city is looking at different zoning areas. So that's how they're looking at it, right? So, and they don't want to combine the two. So your primary zoning type that you're going to run into is R1, 2, and 3, and depending on what you plan to do with your development, that's the zoning types that you will encounter, right? So how does zoning affect you, right? So if the zoning doesn't allow, if you say, hey, listen, Sam, I'm going to buy this parcel or buy this house and knock it down, and then I'm going to build a 30-foot high 2-story home, but the zoning restriction says you can only go to 25 feet. Is that a problem? Absolutely. It's a big problem, right? So understanding your zoning laws will tell you exactly what your maximum height is and what your capacity for that particular parcel is, right? And you got to pay attention to all of those things. So understanding entitlements, right? So what are entitlements? If you don't know what they are, entitlements are legal rights granted by the government that allows the developer to use or alter a piece of land for a specific purpose. The entitlement process ensures that the development complies with local laws, environmental regulations, etc. Right. So let's talk about the types of entitlements, which is going to be important. And I don't want this to scare you off, right? So some of the times, when you're dealing with entitlements, you're allowing your professional that you hired that's on your team to handle these changes that need to happen to the parcel, right? That's the land use attorney. But it's good to know and understand what they are and why they are important, right? So zoning variance, right? So if a property owner wishes to develop their land in a way that does not conform to the current zoning regulations, but can apply for a variance, all right? So this allows for exceptions to rules such as building a taller structure or reducing the required setback. So I got a story about when I owned the body shop. I mentioned that earlier. And what happened was the code enforcement was like circling our building out of nowhere. For some reason, it got really hot in our area. We had all our licenses and stuff like that. And when we sat down with the landlord, we told them what type of business that we were, starting. And they said, okay, yeah, we don't have a problem with that kind of business, right? So that was the landlord said. So then code enforcement was coming around saying, hey, listen, this type of business is not zoned for this. And we go, what are you talking about? When we leased from the landlord, they said that, it was okay. But what ended up happening is I had to go to the city and get a zoning variance, right? So there was like 5 other businesses that represented the type of business that I was conducting. But, honestly, I'm the most savvy. So I went down to the city. I asked them exactly what they needed. I had to sit down with a committee and I pitched the reason why this zoning variance is necessary, why other businesses are represented in here, and it creates a big calamity. We're fully licensed, fully insured, we are, fully compliant, and all we need is this zoning variance to be approved so we can operate our business and add jobs. You got to speak their language, right? So they want to hear that you're adding jobs, you're bringing value to the community. So for my body shop, they approved me for my zoning variance, right? We got our business certificate, and then now we are good to go, and we are official for our business type, right? So that's just one example of a zoning variance and how it could help you before getting further down the road when it comes to your new development project. As a matter of fact, you can't even get down the road with your development project unless you get that zoning variance. But all right, so then there's also rezoning, right? So what is rezoning? So if the land is zoned for the use that does not align with the desired development, the developer may apply for a rezoning. So, for example, if the developer may request that the parcel or the agricultural land be rezoned to residential or commercial use, right? So that's another option for you as well, right? So it depends on what's the city zoning map look like, and then what are they forecasting into the future. Also, too, what are going to be some of the needs attached? In that example, we said agriculture to residential. What are going to be some of the needs attached for that residential community to be built, right? So what are they going to require? They're going to require roads, street lights. These are the types of things that they'll make you pay for, right? If the city doesn't have a let's say like a pumping station for city water or something like that, you may need to build one, right? So whatever you need to do, you factor that in, but you're going to need to support for the rezoning, right? So that's what that looks like, right? And then there's also things like conditional use or a CUP permit, right? So these are permits granted for land uses that are generally not allowed under current zoning, but can be acceptable with certain conditions, right? So the CUP might be required for special uses like schools, hospitals, religious buildings, and residential zones, right? So it really all depends on what the need is to apply for that specific permit. All right, so then there's also planned unit development, right, which is zoning designated that allows for more flexible land use than traditional zoning laws, right? So it's typically involved high-scale development where residential, commercial, and recreational uses are mixed into one cohesive plan, right? So I don't know if you guys ever heard of a master developer, right? So what a master developer does is they'll take a big parcel, maybe sometimes several hundred acres, and in this master development is where you'll see this planned unit development. They'll build schools, they'll build parks, they'll build grocery stores, commercial, they'll build residential, they'll build the whole community out, right? And this typically takes about 10 to 15 years for this master development to be completed, but they'll build all the infrastructure needed to comply with the needs for the land use, right? So that's what a master developer is. So this is the type of permit that they would acquire for that particular parcel, right? So, and then also subdivision map approval, right? So once you subdivide all of the lots, then that's going to need to be submitted and approved by the city for that subdivision, of the parcel, right? So, and then after that, even after you get your approval, you always need building permits, right? So you will need to get building permits for each parcel and opened and closed out for each thing that you're building, right? So you can't avoid that. Just because you got the approval does not mean that you don't have to submit the plans for each and get those approvals and pull that permit. So that's going to be absolutely necessary. So, let's dive a little bit deeper. So, how zoning laws and entitlements impact real estate development. We're going to give you a breakdown on what that looks like. So, zoning laws and entitlements determine what kind of project can be built on a particular piece of land and how it must be constructed. So navigating these regulations successfully is crucial in minimizing risk, optimizing land use, and maximizing the return on investment, right? So we're going to talk about other things attached to that. So let's talk about project feasibility. So before purchasing land, developers must check zoning laws to determine whether the intended use, residential development or commercial, etc., is allowed. So if current zoning does not permit the intended use, rezoning or variance will be necessary, right? So that's how the game is played, right? And you want to probably do this under your due diligence period before you close on the land, right? So you might say, hey, contingent upon this approval, right? And then now that gives you an out, because if you don't get it, then now you have the ability to back out of the contract, right? So development timeline. So entitlement process can be lengthy, obtaining necessary approvals from local authorities, neighborhood councils, and others. You got to also understand that they have to notify all of the cities. They have to put it in the paper. You have to put out signage, all of this stuff, to, if anybody has grievances for what you're looking to do, they get their time to be heard at the city on why or why not, right? And then you also get your time on the benefits that it'll bring to the city. Always lead with value that you are going to bring to that particular area with your project, right? So there's also a couple things. There's always cost risk attached to doing anything, right? So being a developer is a risky business because you have so many different aspects that you are responsible for. So, but for me, it's easier because this is what I've done for the last 8 years, and knowing what to expect, and it is repetitive for me. So, but it all comes with inherent risk. Investing comes with inherent risk. So rezoning or seeking variances often comes with application fees, legal costs, and the risk of denial. So additional developers may need to adjust their plans to meet specific conditions imposed by the local government. So you start out with a specific plan, right? That you submit to the city. Hey, listen, I want to do the variance. This is the project I want to build. Now, they might come back and say, hey, listen, because of the size of this, the setback is going to be 10 feet or 20, 25 feet in the front, and then, 15 feet in the back, and then 7.5 on the sides or 10 on the sides. So then your building can't be 2,800 square feet. It may be 2,550, right? And then you have to readjust your plans to fit those parameters and to get the green light to move forward on the project. So those are the type of things that you should expect coming back from the city when you are looking to make these sort of concessions, right? So community impact, right? So some developers face opposition from the local community and partnership. If the project involves rezoning or changing the character of the neighborhood, you're probably going to get some pushback, right? It's going to require some public hearings, and in those public hearings, they do take into account what the public is saying about the particular project. So I like to mine a specific area. Now, there's a reason why I do that, because I'm pulling permits in that specific city. I'm seeing some of the same inspectors. If I need to, call somebody, I've made relationships within the city that I can make a few phone calls. I could get things pushed through. And because they know Sam's about community, and they're more likely to, give Sam the green light on this particular project, right? So now, are all projects going to be that complicated? Most of them are not. You may not even encounter it in your lifetime of some of the changes that I'm talking about, but it's good to know and have it in your bag and understand what are the things needed to push a project through to the other side, right? So let's talk about environmental consideration. Environmental regulations such as those protecting wildlife, endangered species, and historical landmarks can impact zoning and entitlement. So, for example, I'll give you one. Right? We have a community down here in South Florida, Southwest Ranches, big lots, right? There's avian species. It was technically kind of part of the Everglades. So protecting avian species, having certain type of tree species. If there's owls and stuff like that, they don't want you to, to mess with them, and then you have to have a specific plan on how to rehouse them. So you have to understand that these things play a factor in you moving this project forward, right? So navigating zoning and entitlement process. So real estate developers must navigate local zoning laws and the entitlement process to ensure that their projects are improved and completed. This requires careful planning and coordination with local officials, lawyers, planners, and other professionals. Right. So a friend of mine bought some parcels in Memphis, and he was like gun ho on making these particular purchases, right? And he said to me, Sam, he's like, I want to take this one lot and I want to sliver them into eighths, and I want to put a property on each, right? But then when he went to the city, they said that plan doesn't work, right? It's not, they're not going to allow you to sliver it into eighths, on that one particular parcel. So his dreams and his thoughts on why he bought that property didn't exist the way that he was envisioning it, right? So these are the types of things that are very important in understanding zoning and entitlements and why they are very important. They could either freeze your project or get you in big trouble, because now you have to reallocate and re-anticipate the total revenue it's going to produce, which is going to affect you. And if you have investor partners, it's going to affect your investor partners as well. So without being too long-winded, that's what zoning laws is. That's what entitlements are. And that's why it's important that you need to know the game that you're in and understanding what is zoning, why is it important, and how to move your project forward. Like I said, this is Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder. I'm the best in the business, and it's not even close. Thank you for joining me today. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a wealth of knowledge. I want to see you win when it comes to new development. Have a good day.